can't stop thinking about the MMA Guru.
You fat bald liar!
Not the MMA Guru that most people know. The screamer. The rager.
You f***ing ugly little
The impressionist.
You mad fool. You'll do nothing.
The exposer.
Maybe the riskiest video I've ever had to make on my channel.
And the MMA fighter's worst nightmare.
MMA Guru's just a short, fat, little, miserable hater.
But the MMA Guru, less known.
No one likes me.
I can't stop thinking about a man who says he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his success on this platform.
Like, the result of failure of not making it on YouTube for me was... I don't know if I would exist.
I can't quite shake this disconnect between a man who people love, who people hate, and who people just don't know.
You really think I got doxxed once? You really think that? And it stopped?
I guess more appropriately, I can't stop thinking about the MMA Guru's place in time, his place in this sport, his place here on YouTube, his place at the center of a changing media landscape.
Who are you? Where did you come from?
See, 20 years ago, MMA journalism was a very different world.
Hey, Ariel, Helwani in cold-ass Las Vegas, Nevada.
This video will not only explore MMA Guru's life, but also I want to go through the entire history of how this sport has been documented outside of the octagon, from the old school internet forums to Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, the first wave of MMA YouTubers, and finally, this new era of content creators. By the runtime, you can see that this is indeed a winding path that we will explore throughout the course of this video. In the first part, we go over the pre-Guru era, and in the second half of this video, it is all beanie and all wheelchair. This isn't some hate or drama video on anyone mentioned, this is simply the MMA Guru and the death of MMA media.
Ultimate fighting is.
Ultimate fighting, you can do whatever you want. There's
Not
no
anymore. No, it's not exactly that way.
Beat each other up until one gives it. It's brutal.
It's 2003, and the UFC is fighting for its life once again on mainstream media. Joe Rogan, in between making guest appearances on Friends and hosting Fear Factor,
What are you doing? You can't assault people.
is doing the rounds of late-night shows trying to legitimize the sport that he loves.
How is that human cockfighting? You know what that is? That's actual fighting.
MMA had its back against the wall, and to say corporate MMA media didn't exist at the time would be an understatement. There was an active attack by the establishment to oust this sport.
You've got mail.
Before places like MMA Fighting, MMA Underground, or the MMA Junkie websites, there was nothing really in the way of reporting. ESPN and Yahoo would rarely ever even touch the sport. In fact, often promotions for the events just fell under the boxing category on news sites. Journalists just didn't care about MMA. There simply wasn't enough in monetary value to inspire corporate news sites and broadcasters to give their best news coverage of MMA events, and you see that in the distinct lack of historical footage of old press conferences and weigh-in shows pre-UFC 100. When I edit these videos together and conduct my research, it's essentially impossible to find old-school footage of the sport's fledgling days, and that doesn't mean that there wasn't any young reporters or media outlets out there trying to make a name for themselves in the space. I mean, look at people like MMA Ring Report, who managed to document a prepubescent Georges St. Pierre. It's just, well, look at it. This guy looks like he's filming a ransom video for Al-Qaeda, and wouldn't you know it, MMA Ring Report, one of the biggest and most active at the time, just simply doesn't even exist anymore. The space wasn't fit for careers. The UFC did do their best with what they had at the time and would do frequent rounds of news stations and late night shows, but the fact is, they were sent there basically to argue the validity of the violent spectacle.
Is it safer than boxing? About as safe as boxing? Not as safe?
I think it's safer than boxing with permanent damage.
And that's just how it was for a long time. The sport was reserved for the back pages of magazines, and VHS tapes doomed to collect dust, purchased long after the pay-per-view had wrapped up.
From Vidmark Entertainment.
It wasn't until that infamous day in 2005 where Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin battled it out in the conclusion of The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 that people actually started to pay attention to the sport in earnest, a sport that rather famously was about to be bankrupted, saved by the blood sacrifice of two warriors. It was the airing of the show on Spike TV to the masses that made people for the first time actually stop and question why they hadn't been following this sport before. It was the catalyst that would put the UFC on the tracks to mainstream success, and so quite fittingly, the small community that had been loitering in the dark depths of the internet for a while was about to exponentially grow. There was only one place waiting for all these newbies wandering into the sport for the first time, and that was the digital swamp that was the MMA forums. It's 2006, I'm 10 years old and Pokemon Diamond and Pearl has just graced the 2 rectangles on my Nintendo DS. I'm too young and too childish to know what's going on around me. The squishy meat sack in the center of my skull hasn't taken its final form yet, and so whilst I drooled over the Sonoa region's seemingly endless expanse, other far more involved and informed folk are instead sitting down to see this rather interesting poorly designed 3D animation flash across their screen. Bloodthirsty fans now hooked in a post-Ultimate Fighter Season 1 world were struggling to get their hands on official highlight reels of UFC combatants, and those Japanese warriors halfway across the globe, Fedor39 of Reddit, had spun up his AOL dial-up broadband, smacked in the address of the Sherdog forum, and begun to digitally digest the glorious mixtapes of Pride legend Sakuraba and the sizzle reel of Chuck Liddell leaving his victims frozen like Elsa. These were the fledgling days of the sport, the Wild West if you will. The UFC had only been around for just over 10 years, Pride less than 10, and there were very few ways to consume the sport on demand, as Fedor39 proclaims from the r/MMA Reddit. When internet and MMA was in its childhood, you couldn't really get access to MMA, at least not in Europe. Everyone could rent the early UFCs, but that wasn't MMA in the sense of Shuto or KOTC, so what my generation did was to order bootleg UFC and Pride shows on VHS, but those were always a couple of months old. The main thing about enthusiasts at the time was Sherdog.com's highlights of fighters. How many of this sub has memories of this scarcity of MMA, and what is your stories? And the most important question, which highlight is your favourite? For me, it's either Vovchenchen or the Gracie Hunter one. And he wasn't the only one who consumed MMA in this fashion during this time. Countless other below this Reddit post discussed how these early internet forums were the lifeblood of the sport at this age. Sherdog, perhaps the oldest and most well-known, had been growing like a bacteria in a binary petri dish since 1997, put together by Jeff Sherwood, a computer engineer at Boeing. Yes, this Boeing. Initially, Sherdog was sparse, an archaic site that mostly documented future event lineups and posted the results afterwards. It was around this time, at the turn of the new millennium, that the forum that we're discussing would be programmed into the site. This forum section included discussions, pictures that were like precursor to memes, and the aforementioned highlight reels were posted here, crafted under the dim, flickering glow of cathode ray monitors, the devotees of mixed martial arts, all huddled around their clunky, boxy and slow desktop towers that hummed like a battle tank. The original highlight reels that got placed onto the site led to exponential growth for the place. But back then, the World Wide Web was a sluggish beast to say the least. Pages loaded with lethargy, each pixel pained as it stuttered into existence. And as those lost or lured pilgrimaged to the dank binary slums in their droves, looking for these highlight videos would inadvertently crash the site, almost out of existence. Jeff Sherwood would ultimately fix the technological issues holding it back, and with it, Sherdog was on the path to dominance. Its homepage remained a confusing, disjointed concoction of random discussion threads and horrific-looking animated PNGs for a while, a webcore dystopia crafted by sweaty CTE fans. Even back then, the MMA community was a bit unhinged, controversial, and unafraid to put anyone and anything under their ruthless crosshairs. I mean, look at this for example. Marlboro Man posts a picture of him and his boys just before the fights at UFC 56, where Nate Quarry was about to take on Rich Franklin for the middleweight title. The guys are obviously extremely proud of themselves and their fit, get together for a little photo, and shortly after post it to the forums, and unknowingly, they have just opened themselves up to 47 pages of abuse from their so-called community. If you line them up and throw a gecko above their head, you could kill that gecko. Gay patrol. The lack of women in this picture is not surprising. Marlboro Man had just fell victim to the same fate that had befell this poster from a few years before, posting a photo of himself with Matt Hughes back in 2003. "You look like Michael Stipe with even more AIDS. Jealous? No, but thanks for making me feel much better for not being you. How's the chemo going?" Hate was spread amidst the cluttered threads and the garish banners that blinked enough to cause epilepsy. The interfaces were crude and as far away from polished as Joe Rogan's head. And whilst Sherdog had existed for a long time pre-Tough, it was the droves of new fans that took the site to new heights. Volumes of users fled across not only Sherdog, but also the MMA Underground and more unknown ones like MMAforum.com. Many people had found a digital home after their introduction to the sport, and it was a great time to be an MMA fan. The discussion threads mounted, and with it, the sport grew richer, gaining depth, lore, and meaning. And within these threads, every opinion would be met with hostility, every credible point raised to ash and dust by simply stating that the point is gay or boring. And that's what it was all about, shooting the shit with the boys. Their profile pictures, flaming skulls, or sexy women. It's ironic, almost stereotypical, but what's better than fulfilling the roles that God has blessed us with? And whilst I could sit here and paint a picture of the forums being this cesspool, Sherdog actually had a lot going for it. It was constantly breaking news, writing articles, conducting interviews with fighters, hosting the fighters' rankings, and doing Q&As between fighters and fans. The Fight Finder was launched in 2001, a highly detailed web of every single fighter, who they have fought, their records, all linked together, their records immortalized for better or for worse on Sherdog. It's not controversial to say that this massive database of basically 99% of the fighters in the world is Sherdog's greatest contribution to the MMA community. Many sites have since built off of this, but Sherdog was absolutely the first. It was a real hive mind for the sport. If you needed context or updating on the sport, or just wanted to talk the shit with the boys, this is exactly where you would go. The company's employees were also going to the events and covering them also. They were almost like the multi-tool of the MMA internet at the time, if you will. Sherdog was the pioneer of MMA forums, but there were others, just like MMA Underground or Tapology, and collectively, they were the flickering beacons for MMA fans, a home where their shit opinions could echo through the digital void, a void that hosted the lifeblood of this sport. And it is within this melting pot of losers, wannabe fighters, undercover UFC employees and true fans, and everything in between, where those who were seeking to create a career in the niche and to establish themselves as credible sources of information started their journey. And it's here where we meet our first protagonist of this tale of MMA media, MadSquabbles himself. He's a Leo, he's straight, a host of the MMA Whoop-Ass radio show, and is only on MySpace for networking and friends. Apparently, his MySpace links to his MMA blog, where he goes by the pseudonym MadSquabbles, which for those paying attention knows that this will actually end up being quite the bit of foreshadowing for the story of MMA Guru to come. MadSquabbles graduated college in 2002, majoring in philosophy and government. Whilst at college, he also served in the United States Marine Corps as part of Battery H, a group of artillery boys whose days on the battlefield had become rather redundant in modern warfare. Nevertheless, he served with pride until 2005, ending his service at the rank of sergeant. A year later, MadSquabbles would start his aforementioned blog. Here he would post discussion threads on his true passion, MMA. MadSquabbles was doing real work, detailed articles, interviews, fight dissections, and putting to use that college degree which had made him particularly good at writing. Although he was hiding behind a name on the internet like many at the time, he actually went by the name Luke Thomas. And not only was he a huge fan of MMA, but he had actually practiced various combat sports in his teenage years and early adulthood, even being a part of the Marine Corps martial arts program. His writings were at a very high standard, blowing out the water most of what had existed previously, and his perspectives and reflections on the sport really did stand out in the space. It didn't take long for other MMA media sites to take notice. By early 2007, Fight Opinion, a pretty big website at the time, started promoting MadSquabbles on their site, which drove a lot of new attention his way. A month later, MMA Mania was on the MadSquabbles bandwagon as well, and then a month after that, he would get his big break. Bloody Elbow came knocking. Luke had left the Marines with clear intentions of chasing a dream to live a life working on the periphery of this sport. And here he was, making his dream come true in such a short space of time. Luke would write his farewell post on the MadSquabbles blog, dated May 21st, 2007. The bleak, unrefined website was now doomed to collect digital dust on the shelves of the Wayback Machine. Luke may not have realized it at the time, but this move to Bloody Elbow would in fact change the landscape of MMA media for a generation to come. His work during 2007 to 2009 was such a contrast to what had been produced in the space before. One of their first breakthrough concepts was that of meta rankings. Bloody Elbows was an aggregate of not only all the MMA media websites, but also community rankings as well. Nate Wilcock was quoted in regards to this meta ranking saying, "Based on the premise that opinions are like assholes, everybody has one and they all stink, instead of putting up our own subjective fighter rankings, we compile and average the rankings of every source we can find online." In 2009, Bloody Elbow was one of the biggest blogs in the MMA space, if not the biggest, and Luke Thomas was a household and beloved name in the space. In an interview in 2009, it became clear why Luke stood out from the rest, why he seemed so different. But once more, it also provides subtle foreshadowing for the MMA Guru story to come, because we learn that Luke is a little bit conceited, something that would ultimately be his downfall in the end. Asked by fellow MMA blogger Blez if Luke had trained to be an MMA fighter at one point, and Luke replies with, "Not true. I was lifting weights with a personal trainer because I was trying to bulk up for a television appearance. Yes, that makes me vain, but there is nothing that irks me more than MMA journalists or analysts who are gigantic fat slobs. One need not train 5 days a week to be a competent analyst of MMA, but experiencing the rigors of physical punishment certainly informs your judgment. Moreover, appearances matter in MMA. For a sport with such a sensitive image issue, how those members of the MMA community appear and conduct themselves carries weight with the mainstream. You would not believe how much easier it is to convince a skeptic that MMA is something they could enjoy if you carry a professional appearance." This statement from Luke is very telling of two things. One, he sees his role in this space very differently than most of his peers, and that is reflected in not only his work, but, well, the way that he carries himself. His answers to simple questions in this whole interview showcases overcompensation to sound smart. For example, Blez asks, "Is there any challenges to being a blogger in MMA?" And Luke responds to this simple question with, "MMA is a splintered sport. The universe of fighters, fight locations, countries, promoters, fans, camps, businesses, and the myriad of other parties, all part of this circus, interact in often very complicated, tangential, contradictory, and other confusing arrangements. MMA is a moving target, both as it grows and fundamentally alters itself. Trying to grab the blade of MMA while it falls is perilous, difficult, and even fraught with disaster." Like Luke, answer the fucking question. With that, there is no surprise that Bloody Elbow was described by Luke himself as the thinking man's MMA blog, and it's no wonder that Bloody Elbow became so famous during this time. It was such a contrast to what had been executed previously. Luke had left the pseudonym of MadSquabbles in the distant past, carving out a very special place for himself in the MMA community. People turned off by the absolute brutal mess that the forums often descended into found comfort in Luke's more professional, thoughtful writing. Many people considered him an extremely important part of the space, and ones whose existence was intrinsically tied to the growth of the sport. Millions of people were going to the website weekly to get their dose, and Luke Thomas's time on Bloody Elbow for many will always be looked back on with reverence and nostalgia. He was a wordsmith, a storyteller of sorts, and whilst his place in this story is not over yet, certainly his time under the spotlight of MMA journalism was about to be. Between 2007 and 2009, Bloody Elbow sat proud as the biggest in the industry at the time, but there was some cracks starting to show. A lot of the articles began to have this political undertone, and that aforementioned snobbery that Luke wrote with began to wear a little bit thin, and a gulf emerged between the sewer-like forums and the polished elitist journalism of Bloody Elbow. The divide gave way for the rise of another, a personality that could cut down the middle and sew both aspects of media consumption together. Now it's time to meet perhaps the biggest cog in this MMA media machine. It's the middle of 2007, just 6 months after MadSquabbles has bid his followers farewell. And another man is sat at his desk in his basement, and he's tired as well. Heartbroken even. His passions for team sport is fading. Ariel Helwani is hunched over a beige, chunky keyboard, the faint glow of his VGS monitor casting shadows across his face, strained under the weight of determination as he aims to chase a dream he has had since graduating Syracuse University with his broadcasting journalism degree. He taps into his keyboard the following: "As I began to grow tired of the traditional team sports, I found myself paying more attention to the trifecta of combat sports, mixed martial arts, boxing, and pro wrestling. Maybe it's because they represent everything team sports are not, or maybe it's because I draw some kind of enlightenment from watching two guys beat the crap out of each other. Who knows?" In his final year of college, Ariel had managed to get a job working at HBO as a sports production assistant.
Then I worked at ESPN Classic. I worked at a production company in New York City. So I moved to New York. I get this job from Spike doing this competition about finding, and excuse me if it sounds very sexist, like the sexiest bartender in America. After a week there, I realized that this wasn't the place for me. And so I actually went to my boss's office a week after getting hired, and I told him this was a mistake and I'd like to leave. So I start this website, a blog, just on WordPress, and I just started hustling.
He signed off his first aforementioned blog post with its final sentence: "Welcome to Jerry Park, the Coliseum of combat sports. Touch 'em up." Helwani was probably the physical manifestation of Luke Thomas's worst nightmare, a far cry from the jacked, manly, muscle-bound news frontman that Thomas had claimed was needed to carry the sport's insights on his shoulders. Ariel was thin, pasty, and socially awkward.
They used to say really mean things about me, like saying where'd they get this guy from Auschwitz?
But what he didn't have in physical attributes, he certainly made up for in his passion for not only the sport of MMA, but journalism and writing as well.
I really felt as a fan, it wasn't really being covered properly. Like
I was like searching for places who would cover it, and you couldn't really find a lot of places. So there was the UG, there was Sherdog.
I wasn't being serviced as a fan. And
maybe I could be the guy. Maybe I could be the Howard Cosell of MMA.
The space was in dire need of someone who could humanize these athletes, tell their personal stories of struggles and dreams, do something far more compelling than what has been mustered up at the time.
I'm going to show the world that I can interview fighters better than anyone doing it right now. The athletes just give these canned answers all the time because, they just have to go through the motions.
That Keen and Peele skit about MMA fighters wasn't actually too far from the truth of promotion at the time.
When you eat through plastic tube, when you are paralyzed from neck down.
Wait, what did he say again?
People wanted to peek beneath that thin veneer of bravado that many fighters at the time couldn't help but display.
I'm going to teach him some humiliation when I kick his ass.
There was absolutely an appetite for what made these fighters tick, what made them cry, and what they fought for beyond glory and blood. Ariel saw the opening, and he seized the moment. At the time, the world was shifting. Smartphones were new, the Iraq War dominated headlines, but MMA was starting to creep into the zeitgeist. Helwani used MySpace to his advantage, messaging fighters directly, building a network that gave him access others lacked. He dug into the why a fighter risked it all, what drove them to step into the cage. His interviews even then had a rhythm, a way of pulling out raw emotion that made fans care. He was laying a new, not so trivial foundation for journalism in the space. After only a few months of posting on the site and conducting interviews, all of which are unfortunately now lost to time, just broken links below his articles, he had managed to make a name for himself. Noticed by MMA Rated.
Hey, Ariane Celeste here for MMARated.com.
He managed to land a job with the company and found himself packing his bags almost every single weekend, going to all major events that Rated could get their hands on.
All right, Ariel Helwani here for MMARated.com with the hammer. Mark Coleman. Mark, how's it going? You expect to be out 6 weeks from this point or from when the fight was supposed to take place?
6 weeks from when the fight, what do you mean? From when I hurt my knee?
Right, yeah. Like when did you hurt your knee?
Last Friday.
Last Friday, okay.
Clearly, Ariel was more proficient with his hands on the keyboard than standing behind a microphone. Granted, he was only several months into this new career path, but despite his lack of confidence in person, he still had big plans for himself. It's just that when met with the reality of what covering the sport entailed, he started to really doubt himself. Ariel, by his own admission, started to withdraw from the interviews, terrified in every single interview that he conducted that he was just messing them up.
And I lost all confidence, and I was like, man, this is not for me. I shouldn't be doing this. I thought I was a little better than I was maybe.
But there was a turning point, a light in the darkness.
And I was feeling kind of down, and I did an interview with Gina Carano.
Ariel Helwani in Midtown Manhattan for the Elite XC on CBS press conference with Gina Carano.
We had like an awkward moment where like I held the microphone in front of her too long, and I was like,
an awkward vibe to me.
No, but you hold the microphone here really long.
And I was like, I'm not really good at this, am I? I said something like this, and she's like, no, you're good, but you just keep the microphone too close. This is all on camera. And I was like, yeah, you're right, maybe I should go back to radio. And she's like, no, you're good. And she started like laughing, and we were like,
I see that.
Yes.
I see that. It's good. It's all right.
All right. And I was like, wow, she thinks I'm good. I was like, you know what? Screw those haters. This is funny. Maybe I am a little weird, but I could get good interviews. I could make them a little more personable and things like that. And she really gave me confidence.
You put a lot of hard work into it because it's really good, actually. I visited it.
You've been to it?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I like it. I like your style, man.
Thank you.
And I always look back to that point, and from there, I just like stopped caring about what people said.
Gina Carano, in a way, saved Ariel in that moment. From that point on, for the next 2 years, Ariel bounced between maintaining his blog on Jerry Park and conducting as many interviews for MMA Rated as he could, growing in confidence and perfecting his craft.
Ariel Helwani for MMARated.com, being joined by the California Kid.
His interviews became more fluid, snappy, and he was drawing out great answers from his guests. What set him apart from Luke, though, was that he didn't take himself too seriously. He wrote with heart, but he didn't need to overcomplicate this sport or the stories that he was writing. There was no needless philosophical tirades. It was just great, simple writing. There was one more frontier that Helwani wanted to conquer. In his own words, he wanted to be the Howard Stern of MMA, and when AOL purchased MMA Fighting in 2009, they came knocking at Ariel's door to provide that exact opportunity for him. Lou Thomas at Bloody Elbow and John Morgan at MMA Junkie had dominated the space for years at this point, but they were about to be eclipsed by MMA Fighting and Ariel Helwani's ascension. That June in 2009, Ariel launched the MMA Hour, and Ariel wasn't lying when he said he was inspired by the Howard Stern show, blending audio and video together.
It could be the best thing since sliced bread, I don't know. But what I do know is that he's never had a fight in the UFC, so why the f*** is he getting a title shot?
Back in 2007, Inside MMA had tried something similar with a show dedicated to shining a light on fighters, but with its corporate sheen, it lacked the intimacy of what Ariel was doing. Naturally, Helwani began getting a cult following with his show, which had been exposing him to more people than Jerry Park ever could, and it was at this time, post-UFC 100, where the sport was gaining true traction. With the UFC signing bigger names and landing more TV deals, Helwani's show was a game-changer nestled amidst this popularity surge. He wasn't just asking fighters about their fight strategies or if training camp was hard, he asked about their fears, their dreams, the toll of a life spent fighting. Fans tuned in to see fighters open up about everything and anything, their barriers lowered by Ariel's sincerity. Much to the dismay of Luke Thomas, Ariel, the frail nerd, was shaping the course of how this sport was seen. A year later, in April of 2010, Helwani got his first true major break.
I went to Abu Dhabi for UFC 112. That was Anderson Silva against Damian Maia, and it ended up being a horrible fight. No one from American media went to the event, and everyone knew that Dana was so pissed because he didn't stick around to put the belt on Anderson's waist. And so a huge turning point for me was that post-fight interview with Dana White at the press conference.
Ariel Helwani, post-fight at UFC 112. Dana, you said a lot of big words today. Embarrassed, disgrace.
I remember that interview doing 1 million views on YouTube. This is back in 2010 when those things like weren't all that common, in less than 24 hours, and thinking like, wow, this feels like a big deal.
And the second massive viral moment for him was this rather famous interaction between Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker.
When I was interviewing The Undertaker after Brock lost to Kane.
Now, I had seen this clip hundreds of times. It's practically famous, but I just never knew until researching this video that it was in fact Ariel who'd been recording it. He naturally became a staple at UFC events, asking as many questions as he wanted, exclusive access to fighters pre and post fight, and kind of became Dana's marketing machine. Along with a few other journalists and reporters, the UFC finally had its own little squad, no longer reliant on legacy media channels and broken kids trying their hands at interviews. The press conferences and weigh-ins were now always documented, and shown to the world on social media and the aforementioned MMA websites, and there seemed to be a real sense of scale with the production of not just the UFC, but MMA as a whole. No longer were articles listed on the boxing segment on news sites. It had its own dedicated space carved out for itself, Ariel leading the pack the whole way. It was that year in 2010 that Ariel would start his undefeated, undisputed MMA's Best Journalist winning streak at the World MMA Awards, a pretty fantastic achievement for a relative newcomer, but his dominance had only just begun. The MMA Hour and Ariel Helwani's interviews would go on to provide some of the greatest moments the sport would ever see outside of the cage, immortalized in memes and funny compilations forever.
Of course you're invited, yeah. No fat chicks, yeah. Don't bring Mrs. Helwani.
She was beautiful. You ugly as hell, but
that's your job. But where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
Dana White, who's the president of the UFC, I was interviewing him, and he said on camera one day, this is in November, this guy's turned into one of the best interviewers in the sport, and when he gives you the stamp of approval, everyone else does.
Whilst Ariel and MMA fighting dominated as the faces of journalism, YouTube had started its rapid expansion as well, and more people than ever were posting random clips online, and it is in this time that we started to get the first hints of the MMA YouTubers to come. Whilst pathways to multi-million-dollar careers on the platform had yet to come to fruition, it hadn't stopped people wanting to share their opinions to the collective. Not only that, creative people finally had an outlet to express themselves with greater ease to a wide audience, so we would start to see some boundary-pushing pieces of work that the legacy and corporate MMA media could never dream up, like Not Look Out or Wales animations.
Thanks for sharing us that you crapped your pants in your fight. I appreciate that. That was good inside information.
And people like Tommy Toehold blending animation and commentary on the sport together.
Alan Belcher's morbidly obese Johnny Cash tattoo wasn't enough to stop Okami's chill-like wrestling abilities.
These were the early adopters who pioneered into the space with no real path to success, no real buzz around ad revenue or sponsorships, just people sharing their passion for the sport in unique and creative ways. But let's face it, YouTube was basically just still dominated by highlight reels set to the backdrop of heavy metal. Over the next couple of years, leading towards 2015, the sport got its biggest and, at this point, probably final explosion. Billion-dollar UFC deals, packed arenas, fighters on Wheaties boxes, and in Hollywood movies, and it was Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey at the epicenter of it all. Smartphones were collecting fingerprints from the hands of almost everyone on the planet, desperate to digitally collect in new and exciting parasocial ways to anyone and everything. And it was in this new technological social media era that Ariel Helwani tightened his grip on the MMA media landscape. His content evolved in new and unique ways, like his little walk-around interviews that he did with fighters. To say he was relentless would be an understatement. The MMA Hour was primetime TV for about anyone with an appetite for violence.
Man, man.
Yo, bro,
Okay.
You know what?
That shy, awkward, young man that had walked into a hostile world was now essentially the voice of it. It was a rise like no other, and I would say he single-handedly paved a path for all that was about to come. It was also around this time that the forums we discussed previously had begun to dry up. Most had moved to r/MMA on Reddit, and the forums were just too clunky and had begun to be moderated in a way that people revolted against. And so it was. Things had changed so quickly in less than 10 years. But such is the evolution of the internet. Ariel Helwani, Luke Thomas, John Morgan, Kevin Ioli, Brett Okamoto, Karen Bryant, these journalists and reporters dominated the sport for years. They were the only genuine way to get a hold of fight news, and to be honest, there was no real path for anyone outside of this world to rise up and do their own thing. It's just how things were done, but all of that was about to change forever during the next phase of MMA media. Now we jump forward in time. It's 2016, and it's the time that I actually got into the sport, and from what I can tell, that goes for most of you as well. Dragged here by the siren song that emanated from our computer speakers, luring us to click on montage videos of Conor McGregor trash-talking everyone in his sights and backing it up with spectacular knockouts.
Him calling me out, I think he called me P-head or something, that doesn't even make sense to me.
I distinctly remember the first rumblings of his name at a time when I presume he had just won the title from Chad Mendes. I was currently serving in the Navy as a fresh-faced 18-year-old, no idea what I was doing, locked in a single-man room getting paid a stupid amount of money to play Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC. It was in that December of 2015, when Conor would be taking on Jose Aldo, that after a news article previewing the event caught my eye, that I thought to myself, well, I've got nothing else better to do. I'm stuck in this room all weekend. I might as well watch the event. I bought some snacks and anticipated my first night of violence. It wasn't until it dawned on me that Conor wasn't going to be doing his walkout until 6 AM in the morning that I thought, this shit, and I went to bed. And you know what? I didn't really think about MMA again for several months, until I heard that Conor, now the undisputed featherweight champion, would be taking on a man known as Nate Diaz. But again, I thought to myself, do I really want to stay up and watch that? No, I don't.
Your man's a little pussy.
A couple of days later I went to YouTube to find out how the fight had gone, and this is when I was introduced to a man that you may all know as the Grandmaster.
I knew that fool McGregor was going down from the moment I saw the press conference when he starts talking about gang signs with one hand and animal balloons with the left. I've been putting it down like that for as long as I can remember.
Whilst I'd been confronted with MMA a couple of times before this, what with the highlight montages and Uriah showing off his f***ed up leg, my first conscious exposure to the sport was Mexican martial arts, and to be honest, it was a great reflection of what this sport offers. It's a memed out, jokey, existential nightmare of a community, something that was reflected in the early days of the shitposting on forums, and then evolved to Not Look Out a Whale's animated videos, and now we had Jesse the Grandmaster playing a character breaking down a fight between Conor and Nate. The best part of it all was that this was actually Jesse's first video on the platform too. How serendipitous. Rather unfortunately, the Grandmaster wouldn't be in my life for at least a couple of months after. But then rolled around UFC 200, my friends basically forced me to sit down and watch it, and it would be the first pay-per-view that I watched beginning to end. Needless to say, I was hooked. Every morning started with this sound. No, not that sound, this sound. And I soon became confronted with the best content I'd ever seen out of any community that I'd ever been involved with before. While social media had always been some kind of safe haven for my boredom, I'd never really felt like a set of creators formed a community until MMA. I'll briefly list off those that were around when I got in. This isn't an exhaustive list, but these are the people and the creators that got me hooked on the sport over my first 3 years. That's 2016 to 2019. So it's Mexican martial arts, MMA World, MMA Digest, Keon Kimura.
This is why YouTube is racist.
The Weasel, Chael Sonnen, Mind Smash, Mixed Molly Whoppery, Alpaca Thesaurus, Jack Slack, Joe Rogan obviously, Mojahid, MMA On Point, Mipe Sports, and I'm not going to lie, I used to just religiously digest anything that the UFC put onto their YouTube page. I remember sitting there eagerly anticipating the next post from their channel, getting caught up in their promotion of people like Yair Rodriguez, or even sitting there knowing nothing about the sport, thinking that CM Punk actually stood a chance against Mickey Gall. Those first 3 years of consuming MMA media on YouTube were bliss. I was open to any and everything. Around this time, many regular people had begun to realize that there was actually an opportunity to have a career on this platform as a social media content creator, because the YouTube Partner Program had been rolled out to almost every country and had more appropriate requirements for enrollment. For the first time in the sport's history, corporate journalists actually had some rivalry. It was kind of explosive, to be honest. People with no university training in media or journalism were turning their cameras on in their basement and getting hundreds of thousands of subscribers and making thousands of dollars a month doing it, whether it was the talking head channels like Mexican Martial Arts, or people like Soldier of God MMA making compilations and highlight reels, or Mipe Sports doing the funny fan edits, or just straight up meme content. The platform was on fire. People started walking away from the forums and headed straight to the big red play button to discuss their favorite sports in the comment sections below. Even fighters now had their own channels as well. But there was something massive that had happened for MMA media right before I sat down at 3 AM to consume UFC 200. Unbeknownst to my MMA unconscious mind, it was something that would derail Ariel Helwani's preferential treatment at the UFC events forever. Let me take you back a little bit in time. It's UFC 199, June 2016. and British underdog and longtime top-ranked fighter Michael Bisping has taken a short-notice title fight opportunity in the main event of UFC 199 against newly minted middleweight champion Luke Rockhold. It's a fantastic matchup, but the UFC has been harboring a secret announcement to air right before the main event, something that is going to create extreme buzz for the historic UFC 200 soon to come. But somehow, Ariel has found out what this announcement is, and right before the UFC has their chance to air it, Ariel would leak the extremely exciting matchup to the world of Brock Lesnar's return, spoiling the surprise for tens of thousands of fans watching at home and at the arena. Then things got crazy.
A PR person came and said, you need to come to the back to speak to Dana. And Dana was standing in the back there and said, get out of here. You're done. You're not welcome here. He said, go to Bellator.
I was escorted out of the building for 48 hours.
Removes credentials from a reporter merely for reporting something as fact.
I don't know. It was dirty. He knows it was dirty. And he threw a big pity party for himself, crying on camera and shit.
It's hard to be told that your career is over when you don't think you did anything wrong.
There was a mole. They believe that someone was giving Ariel information, and that information he was using to scoop the UFC's official promotions.
There was no mole. All this stuff is 1,000% not true.
To be told that opportunities are no more, to be told that I'm no longer welcome, you know what that does? You know what that does to you?
Ariel's spoiling of the UFC 200 surprise was just reckless to say the least. Whilst there are obviously different perspectives on this matter, I kind of agree with Dana. Ruining the surprise is a massive turd move, to be honest. If I was a massive fan seeing that little snippet in the trailer at the end, as it went down either on pay-per-view or even better at the arena itself, I probably would have creamed my pants quicker than Napoleon Bonaparte receiving his Valentina Shevchenko 2026 advent calendar. Brock hadn't fought in 5 years, there was no circulating rumours that he would be returning, and so this hype trailer would have hit pretty hard for all fans. But no, Ariel had to go and get his clicks, and you know what? Rightfully Dana was seething. Banning Helwani from UFC events and removing his credentials, on the other hand, was a pretty extreme thing to do, and not exactly warranted.
A lot of these new fans think that I've been banned since UFC 199. Like, the ban lasted 48 hours. I was back the next event.
So, to be honest, both sides in this story were in the wrong. The rest is history, really. Ariel cried on TV, Dana had an aneurysm, and the ramification of these events are still felt to this day, almost 10 years later. Ariel isn't allowed in direct eyesight of the UFC president.
I would have to be escorted out of the venue. Per his request, I couldn't be in his vicinity or his line of sight because they were doing everything in their power to make me feel unwelcome and all this stuff. And so
Ariel would eventually leave MMA fighting and start a new career with ESPN in 2018, where he would have various shows with DC, Chael Sonnen, and continue his MMA hour there. Luke Thomas continued his tenure at SiriusXM, and all those dragged into the MMA fold by the McGregor era would turn to these men for their doses of MMA, whilst the second wave of content creators with their varying personalities gave fans choice, different non-corporate lenses through which to view the sport in interesting and entertaining ways. There was a voice out there for everyone during this period, and it gave something for fans to consume in between the scattered events. These creators gave depth to fighters and storylines, and created buzz outside of the marketing machine that was the UFC. Like I say, it was just a great time to be a fan. But in 2018, a man who couldn't see a future for himself that he wanted to live through was about to take a final chance, one last leap of faith, something that if failed, well, he would end it all. Ariel says he knows what MMA fans want, but there is one thing he didn't know that they wanted, and this man was about to fill that hole. It's April 7th, 2017, and the MMA Guru channel is brought forth into existence out of the digital ether. But there it would sit stagnant, not contributing to the content landfill until a year and a half later. Whilst his first sets of videos are no longer in existence on the site, we do get to see a month or two into his journey, and let's just say, he isn't exactly the confident, well-spoken, direct man that he is today.
But he can still do it, obviously. DC's a beast.
Terrible. You've seen the old videos, you watched them, right?
Yes, I watched.
Terrible, dude. I'm not even looking at the camera, I'm like this the whole time, looking off to the side. It's so bad, it makes me cringe.
Guru was posting multiple times a week, discussing upcoming fight predictions, and then dissecting the aftermaths of shows.
What happened at UFC 230 is what should have happened. That there's rumours that the flyweight division, we don't know how long it's going to stick around for.
UFC Fight Nights Las Vegas, the Ultimate Fighter finale, is on Saturday.
Whilst the Guru refused to give us any eye contact, like my wife after 10 years of marriage, some things familiar to his persona were there. The beanie, the bad lighting, the poor camera, and the blank empty white wall and window used as a backdrop to his YouTube set. These are the essential trademarks of Guru's low budget, low effort, anti-corporate style of YouTubing, things that have essentially gone unchanged in the years that have fallen by. A testament to his infectious personality that has collected so many followers.
Hey guys, it's me.
But this is a different time. There aren't 200,000 people regularly tuning in to watch one of his videos. There is literally no one. Whilst these videos say they have 300 or 400 views, I doubt that it was like that in inception. These views are likely people going back and watching, scoping out what old Guru was like. If you look at the dates for the comments below his videos, you can see that he was posting and literally no one was interacting with him, and yet he was not deterred, addressing his viewers regardless of their existence all the same.
UFC 230, last minute prediction, boys.
And it was this way for a long time, video after video getting no traction. All the while, he still worked a 9 to 5, so I guess that begs the question, why would someone keep posting almost daily for months if there was clearly zero growth? Well, the answer to that is surprising to say the least.
Like, the result of failure of not making it on YouTube for me was I don't know if I would exist. I used to work as a delivery guy for furniture. It was a shit job.
Yeah.
I left school at 16, 17. I had nothing. I used to hand out flyers in the street. I used to change posters. I was working shit jobs. I had no prospects. Every day of my life working that job was literally just a boiling point in my brain. I was the class clown, making everyone laugh, and then there's no one for me to make laugh anymore. And I hated my life so much. Dude, I don't want to live like this. I won't. I hated everything, and I wanted to do something. And I thought, I was literally watching MMA, and I thought, I focus on MMA every day anyway. I might as well do it for a job. The alternative was so bad.
Yeah.
It was not an option to fail. If I didn't make it, I don't want to do this, you know? Like, I had nothing. This was the thing that I wanted to do. So I was going to do it no matter what. This is all I've got. So that's why I have to grind for it.
And this kind of segues into the whole beanie thing. It's not about brand, although it later would be. It's far deeper than that.
And everyone would ask me, why are you putting a beanie on? When you're handing out leaflets and flyers and stuff.
A bum working a shit job, yeah. I think I was getting paid $1.5 grand a month.
Bruv, if someone sees me doing that, when they all have their prospects.
They all went on to uni and did this and that. And then they got out of uni and I'm like a bum on a bus.
But the beanie being on was like, don't recognize me.
So I was looking away and shit like, shit, don't recognize me, dude. I'm a bum right now.
Don't see me. Don't see what I'm up to now, how I've ended up.
And I was shit clothes, no nice trainers, no nothing.
That was the biggest dread of mine. Don't let someone recognize me.
I was scared that my friends in real life would find the channel.
Of course.
So when it had no viewers, I was like, if they find this, I'm going to get bullied.
It's like, let me disguise who I really am, because if I'm seen as who I really am, I'm a failure.
Guru was ashamed of who he was. Even his escape plan posting on YouTube brought him shame. He didn't want people to see what he'd become, working a bog standard job whilst they lived the high life creating careers for themselves through higher education. So he put that beanie upon his head to avoid detection out on the streets.
He wore it because I was scared of someone from school recognizing me, you know.
And then he wore it during his videos so that people, if they did stumble upon his videos, wouldn't recognize him either.
I don't want them to see the YouTube channel until it's going well.
Okay, I understand.
That was because then it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, to be honest, to be working so hard, both in a terrible menial job on minimum wage and grafting his ass off on YouTube, and still have this unshakable self-loathing. I feel like he should have been easier on himself, but perhaps that would not have provided the drive to continue relentlessly on in the face of inner hate.
And for the first 3 years, I had nothing from it. I used to watch my own videos for views. No viewers, no nothing. I was doing it every day. I've got 4,000 and something videos in about 6-7 years. Get here 4 years of not really getting anywhere with it. I did it for 2 years with like barely any money coming in. I got like 2 views a video for ages. That's the grind of it. That's how long I've been on the grind, and that's how you do the grind. Like, I had nothing. This was the thing that I wanted to do. So I was gonna do it no matter what. So I needed it.
Yep.
That's what people don't understand about the grind.
Mm-hmm.
I needed it, man. I did it for like a year, didn't get any money, no views. When it had like 30 subs and 2 views a video, if any of my friends found that, I probably would have been bullied out of stopping making the YouTube videos. Yeah. Everyone asked me, why do you do this? Why do you do this every weekend? Man, I have to.
Yeah.
There is no option otherwise. I refuse to exist otherwise.
Yeah.
On one of my first streams, there's a timestamp in the comments, and it's me saying, I will be in the UFC industry.
Listen, I said I wanted to make UFC. I wanted to be in the UFC industry. I'm gonna be in the UFC industry, and I'm gonna be one of the top guys.
It's hard to even describe to people who haven't lived this content creator life how demoralizing low views are, how much work goes into all of this. It's an incredible time sink where you lose contact with friends, family, and even yourself to a certain extent. It's not always about money for creators or getting views to feed an ego. Often it's just a creative outlet. I remember I told my wife when I first started doing this that the only thing that would make me happy was to get enough money to pay for the Adobe software suites. I just wanted to create something, but for many, that creative outlet can only get you so far. 200 views per video is an unbelievable, dispiriting grind, and yet Guru stuck with it. Hundreds of videos, thousands of hours, his work ethic prevailed all the while. That's a level of consistency that many people would fall short of.
I don't know. It was a good fight while it lasted. It's a great fight. Let's be real, it's quite boring. Holloway versus Douglas Lima. Nate Diaz is taking on... Okay, guys, there's UFC prospect. UFC matchmaking. We're talking UFC on... So I just woke up from a 14-hour sleep.
And so he continued, video after video, day of work after day of laborious work. Whilst he would have some success along the way, what with videos hitting 10,000 or 20,000 views, they were often just one-offs, a little success amidst a tidal wave of unnoticed seeds. His live streams, which are staples in his repertoire, were probably going to be the best out of it all, staying up every weekend almost till 6 AM streaming to a small audience as a fight companion. It really was just a constant grind of videos, full card predictions, post-fight breakdowns, and full event live streams every single weekend. He would find new video topics, such as the matchups to make next videos, which would become a part of his regular quiver. Then when lockdown forced more people online than ever, his views steadily started to increase, more and more, and he would celebrate along the way a fantastic milestone of 10,000 subscribers in September of 2020, 2 years after starting his journey.
Because the beanie did come off at 10k, and now you can wait even longer. The mystery of the MMA Guru. No one's going to know who I am until it's too late, boys.
But then, a half year later, in March of 2021, there was a breakthrough. It started with a video discussing Joe Rogan's commentary that would garner well over 100,000 views, probably the most exposure it had achieved in the niche.
Joe Rogan needs to be fired from the UFC commentary team immediately, straight away.
But he would just 20 days after that follow it up with something that would end up being a viral staple for years to come on his channel, and that would be his tier list videos. His first 3 tier list videos would be incredible hits comparatively, and unsurprisingly, he would keep on producing them. It didn't matter the topic, whether it was the best looking female in the UFC or ranking the most powerful MMA fighter.
Because I'll do one for strikers, I'll do one for grapplers, I'll do one for hairlines. I don't really care. I'll stoop as low as I can go to get some content for this channel. The hottest female fighter in the UFC tier list. And this is the risky part. This is the risky part that can get me cancelled.
At the time, the niche was desperately crying out for content like this. The wider YouTube world had been creative and expansive for almost a decade at this point, but creators in the MMA space were 100% lacking in diverse ways to discuss the sport, and so something like a simple tier list video was ripe to take over the platform. This month would also see the adoption of one of his more iconic thumbnail designs, that of his matchups to make next thumbnails. This redesign for the topic would see greater numbers of clicks also, and it is a thumbnail design that has remained. I guess that this is one thing Guru has always done perfectly. His branding, although simple, is always instantly recognizable, despite what YouTube gurus say on the internet.
With you 11 thumbnail design hacks, some of the top.
All thumbnails don't have to be like Mr. Beast shit all the time. As long as they are individual to you, then you can win in this space. Guru understood this well.
Yeah, I make my own thumbnails. I just, over time, I just found out which ones seem to hit the algorithm. There's like all kind of, if you just study it for long enough and get really autistic about it, you can study like your own algorithm enough to know like what sort of retention rates you're getting and what sort of like impressions lead to how many click-through rates. And
a few months later, I would actually step up to the game, posting a video that only OGs will remember, the Jared Cannonier video regarding his use of crystals. Shout out to the Patreon and YouTube members who actually have access to this old lore. And I distinctly remember at this time, when I was researching content ideas for my own fledgling channel, always coming across Guru's stuff. Seeing him do so well allowed me to think that I could also do this. Years of grind seemed to be really paying off for him, and it was 2021 that showed him he really did stand a chance to make this his full-time career.
And then after a year, I start making money off of it, and I'm getting a few extra $100 a month.
Yep.
Then I started making a few thousand a year after that, at the end of the month.
In all respects, that man who had not seen the light at the end of a tunnel for himself a few years back finally had something tangible to chase. And he wasn't alone. Many future staples had started their own channels around this time. Think Napoleon Bonaparte, who had transitioned into MMA. Lionel Rivera started posting shorts. Patrick Gavia began his breathtaking documentaries, and Flucus was just a few months away from exiting the gym, putting down the protein shake, and giving us some of the best predictions that the MMA niche would ever see, apparently.
Cerebral Surreal is going to be the man to expose the overrated wrestling of Jon Jones.
One thing that we haven't given much attention to is perhaps the biggest arm of the Guru empire, and that is his live streams, a place where he has cultivated a community that can only be described as a true mixed pot of characters and individuals that are certainly generous with their wallets. You've never seen a donation feed like the Guru's.
Thank you for the $5. Thank you for the $2 Canadian a month. Thank you for the $5 Australian, Cameron William. Thank you for the $5. Thank you for the 109 Swedish kroner. I appreciate you very much indeed. Thank you for the $500. All the impression requests I get, it's constant. And like some of the donations I get are really disgusting stuff.
How much will they donate?
$2. I'll do it.
And it's not like they aren't getting their money's worth. Often donations are given to make him do impressions, which are some of the funniest things that I have seen in the community.
That's 9 titles in a row. Now I have to fight for the title. Bisping seeing Izzy's search history impression.
Oh my word! It's hentai!
Impression of Cody Garbrandt rocking up to a kid's birthday party dressed as Spider-Man, then being asked to leave. What? I'm trying to be Spider-Man, what? Zap, zap! I put a lot of effort into this.
His audience are constantly trying to outdo each other to give Guru a ludicrous situation to impersonate a fighter in.
Impression of Anthony Smith pleading with the doctors, asking, "Why are you attacking my family?" during his lobotomy as he peacefully passes away.
This aspect of his YouTube career has no doubt gone on to make him one of the most lucrative and successful creators in the niche, something that we will get onto a little bit later on. Guru's clippable personality ties into the next part of why he was starting to take off, and that is the clipping channels. Alongside his community, he has also cultivated a group of clip farmers, constantly awaiting their next opportunity to clip a moment of rage, the next fight reaction,
Oh my god, Chandler front kicked him out cold! No!
or the next impression.
Impression of Yoel Romero at Last Supper.
Hey! Somebody turn water to wine!
These clippers have gone on to have some very successful channels in their own right, probably enough to even support a full-time career by themselves. This almost conveyor belt nature of never-ending clips entering the space from multiple channels would lead to drastic growth for the Guru himself. As someone in 2022 who rarely touched Guru's content, I was constantly getting bombarded with his clips channel on my homepage. The algorithm wanted nothing more than for me to watch this stuff, my shorts infected with Guru's rants. It was really quite the impressive takeover for the niche. Guru was smart to allow these clip channels to continue unabated with no copyright claims or strikes, because it was funneling people directly to his channel in their thousands, and in Guru's own words, things were really on the up.
And as I started making more money on YouTube, I started slowly not doing 9 to 5, doing a bit less, and doing a bit less. And then this became full-time at the start of 2022. And I started showing my parents, like, look at this I'm making. Yeah. Look at this in my account. They thought I was doing some crime.
That sweet ad revenue was increasing, and that meant that some renovations were in order.
2022, I moved into my shed, which got renovated for this purpose. Just a little bit. Not renovated, but like not made out of cardboard, pretty much. Somewhat put together.
Guru moved out of his bedroom so that he could no longer be disturbed by his dad going into cardiac arrest during main events.
My dad did go into cardiac arrest during the main event.
As his reach was amplified across the MMA niche, it spread to other social media platforms. Clippers posting his content to Twitter would mean that fighters would start to take notice. This was happening in a time where it seemed that every fighter walking into the octagon was permanently online, looking for validation across the World Wide Web. But to some of their shock, and naivety to be honest, instead of constant online praise, they would instead sometimes be confronted by the MMA Guru going on an extended rant about some aspect of their personality or portfolio of their work that he did not agree with.
30-year-old, have kids! Have kids! Have kids, you disgrace, you ain't 20!
One of the first more public victims of this phenomenon was former bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, who Guru had gone after relentlessly since claiming the belt in controversial fashion, and then going on to double down by beating Guru's favourite fighter Peter Yan in the rematch.
I don't like Aljamain Sterling. I find him cringy, unmarketable. I don't like him whatsoever. He's not funny. I don't even like his fighting style.
Then they were like kind of disrespectful towards the fighters, and you could tell, like, respectfully, they didn't really train or, like, you know, compete themselves just by the way they were speaking.
Sounds like that Guru guy.
MMA Guru. I mean, that guy's a fucking whatever. I don't even get me started.
No,
about
go
that.
ahead. Was he a DNB?
A DNB?
Do nothing. Say
he will do nothing. All right, but like,
yo, I got his guys are actually attacking me. Actually,
bro, he
really,
has
really cute.
He has a very loyal fan base. You got to give it to him.
And just to clarify on that, people think I'm like talking shit about the guy. I'm not talking shit about the guy. You can have an opinion on a sport and not actually have done it at a high level. That wasn't the case. I just felt like some of the critique he makes, it could be a little bit disrespectful. And I didn't know he was paralyzed. Somebody was telling me he was paralyzed. I didn't know if, like, they were making a joke. They're like his wheelchair army. He'll hit you with a wheelchair jiu-jitsu armbar. I was like,
so he can't. I guess he can't train. So people were kind of getting on us for that.
Aljamain would be the first person to get tricked into Guru's community, gaslighting anyone that they could into believing that he was a Jewish wheelchair-bound obese loser sitting in his mum's shed.
I didn't know about it. So you got f***ed up recently and you got paralyzed?
The wheelchair thing was like a defense system by my fan base, because anytime anyone would sort of go after me, they would immediately say, oh, you can't do that, he's in a wheelchair. And
when you put everything into context, Guru's emerging virality, his unwillingness to beat around the bush, and his clips channels always taking the most extreme stuff to put on the internet, it's no wonder that his opinions had been laid right at the feet of actual fighters, and so beefs were naturally about to begin.
The MMA Guru, in his parents' shed, and the bantamweight champion of the world, Aljamain Sterling, have had a bit of beef.
And I guess when we reflect on this timeline of MMA media, this was probably the first time that fighters had been so brutally, directly, and indiscriminately called out by somebody in such a viral way. It's one thing a fan slipping into your DMs telling you how shit you are, but it's another thing entirely when someone is making a 15-minute video about you with thousands of views, and then that 15-minute video is being clipped by 8 different channels and then spread around every single social media platform. That's an inescapable cacophony of hate, and that must be overwhelming for some fighters. Another more prominent example of this around that time was that of Dan Hardy and referee Mark Goddard, who actually ended up producing an hour-long podcast talking shit about the Guru, which was subsequently deleted. It started when Guru made a video criticizing, and fairly might I add, the refereeing during the Colby and Kamaru fight, something that many people felt was lopsided and in favor of Kamaru due to whatever grudge Mark Not So Goddard had against the American sex machine Colby Covington. These videos from Guru would garner a lot of attention, enough to get Hardy and Mark to sit down and roast the Guru over the course of an hour.
Maybe he is just a wind-up merchant. Like I think
that's
I think
cool.
he's a bit phone jacker. I think he wants to be funny.
No problem about that.
The problem is he's spreading misinformation in a sport where we need to make sure that some of the information is correct.
You can be the troll, whatever you want to be.
The whole situation put a massive spotlight not only on Guru himself, but his community as well, who wouldn't stop badgering Hardy during his video premieres.
Sometimes on our live streams, someone will pop up and someone will just keep putting MMA Guru. And if they keep flooding the stream, I'll just put them in timeout, like a kid that won't shut up in a back seat.
The video of Guru breaking down the first Colby and Usman fight was eventually taken down from YouTube as well. It wasn't just Dan Hardy though and Mark Goddard who were in the crosshairs, it was literally anyone in this community, whether it was fellow MMA YouTubers like The Weasel or corporate journalists like Ariel Helwani. Anyone and anything could get it. MMA Guru's audience lapped it up all the while. The more controversial, the more views. A cyclical system of hate and drama feeding into itself. Having beef with fighters was a fast track to virality, and Guru took the opportunity. This would ultimately lead to him making guest appearances on other fighters' podcasts. Guru would round off his year with a little showcase on Sean O'Malley's show, and I guess the best thing about all of this was that when he was finally under the biggest spotlight that he had ever seen in his career, talking to a man on the cusp of becoming the #1 ranked bantamweight in the world, he was still completely unafraid to share his raw and honest opinion.
What do you think's gonna happen, Peter versus Suge?
I think Peter's gonna destroy Sean
Really?
in the third round by TKO. I'm sorry. I want you to win.
How many times have you seen someone in this space actually tell a fighter that they don't think that they're going to win, and not sugarcoat it? That really just sealed the deal on Guru's place in this changing media landscape. True, honest discussions that allow fighters to be challenged in a way that they had never been before. This, however, was just a small example of the year that was about to come for Guru, and he was cooking up something rather extraordinary. I think it might be fair to say that most people's first exposure to the beanie-wearing Brit was a little crash out that he had in the wake of, once again, his favourite fighter being dismantled, this time at the hands of Merab. In a clip I am trepid to play all of, as YouTube likes to demonetize the hell out of most things that come out of Guru's mouth.
Nothing will change the fact that you're hideously ugly. You look 70. If you weren't in good shape, you'd look 70 years of age.
But you can imagine he loses his mind and tears the Georgian future champ to pieces. A clipper would post this segment onto Twitter, which would spark many UFC fighters to comment negatively, mainly picking apart Guru's appearance. Dan Hooker, however, was keeping it real, of course.
And I'm going to get to something Terrence McKinney did as well, because he tried threatening me in my live chat. I saw you in there.
The clip truly went viral, and the fact that so many fighters responded was just the icing on the cake of the whole thing. It is here that we would see a big jump once again in Guru's social media numbers online. If members of the MMA media were not aware of him before this, well, they certainly were now, as we would see in the next event to take place. It's mid-2023, MMA YouTube and all its new post-pandemic babies had really started to spring up and get a good grip of the space. Some of these channels had garnered a pretty incredible cult following. Amongst those new in this uprising was the serial clickbaiter and reality TV show superstar Jesse on Fire. His, and excuse the pun, fiery personality alongside the MMA Gurus had prompted MadSquabbles himself to have this very mild crash out.
There are a few of these guys of this type where, first of all, they have like titles. They don't use their real names. They're not interested in being sort of seen as serious people. And I need them to understand something. And I'm honestly not even trying to be mean. I don't care about you. Any of you. He's not alone. There's other ones like him, but a bare minimum of investigation into them. These are people, they are loud for the sake of being loud. They are not interesting. You don't even use your names. You give you guys, there's chat board screen names. What are you, 40? Like, what are you doing? I don't give a about you. I don't give a about your channels. I don't give a about your opinions. They're profoundly stupid. Like, that is the person that thinks that like we're peers enough to have these like the biggest critique you could make of my career is that these kinds of people are the people who think that they're my antagonist. Like, oh my, another one who looks like a skin tag that someone super glued pubic hair to.
For those wondering why I spent like almost 10 minutes talking about Luke at the start of this video, I hope that you can see the relevance here. A guy who had gotten the start of his career under a pseudonym was now rather ironically calling out people for hiding behind a name, and even more ironic is the fact that Jesse on Fire had exposed almost every aspect of his life, not only on YouTube, but cable TV as well. Jesse is doing the literal opposite of hiding behind a name. Guru, like most sensible humans on planet Earth, however, does hide behind his name, and for good reason, as we'll actually find out a little bit later on. The second thing about this, and this is great by the way, is Luke, like many fighters we previously discussed, had been gaslit into believing that the MMA Guru was some kind of fat slob who had nothing but his mum's shed to create his content in. This is, as we all know, everything that Luke Thomas hates.
Who would win in a street fight? Me or Ariel Helwani? I mean, come on, y'all. I beat the out of the MMA media altogether by myself. Have you seen these people?
And to Luke's credit, he even admits as much, stating that he is ashamed that this type of person has become his adversary. For Luke to claim that Guru isn't his peer is very telling of how this MMA media landscape has changed. In Luke's eyes, they're not even in the same space, but I don't think Luke could be any further away from the truth. His inability to see that is, well, ultimately to his downfall. People just simply no longer see a difference between getting their MMA news and entertainment from a guy in his shed and a guy sat behind a panel in a studio. My generation at the very least couldn't care less unless it's entertaining. The hubris of Luke would ultimately see him fall behind, something that becomes increasingly more obvious as this story unfolds. Luke's unwillingness to acknowledge this new MMA media landscape and his peership with someone like the Guru can only be summarized in viewership, and well, it's not great. He may have pioneered a path for MMA YouTubers to rise up, but this world is fickle, and it doesn't care for what was. Luke will always be one of the best at what he does, and his MMA show, Morning Combat, deserves its award-winning notoriety. But this supposed skin tag was about to celebrate a massive milestone.
I'm sick of wearing the beanie. It's making my head itch. So I'm probably going to reveal it at 100k.
No more hiding. It's time the world knew. I am darkness. I am the death of MMA media. I am the inevitable. I am the MMA Guru.
We're going to drop it. My arms are aching. What's up? How's it going, chat? I'm the MMA Guru.
As we have mentioned previously, Guru had spent a lot of his time being accused of only wearing the beanie to cover up his balding head, but as it would turn out, what he was actually hiding underneath that woolly casing was in fact a Ben Askren Romanesque hairstyle. I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. And so from then on, the Guru timeline would be referred to as pre and post beanie. Getting 100,000 subscribers on this platform is truly a miraculous achievement to say the least. For almost 2 years he had gone completely unnoticed, and this is unfortunately the story for most content creators at the time, and those that would give up at this point was the path most trodden, but not for the Guru. He prevailed and would go on to achieve what only 500,000 creators in the world have ever achieved. It was a big moment, and one that regardless of how you feel about the man, must be respected for the unbelievable amount of work that had gone into it, all alone and unguided, pioneering a path deep into the MMA media. With the beanie removed, Guru, much like Wing C, was about to unleash his full power. And so, we now enter the next phase, known as Guru versus the Last Dog Bender. Dricus du Plessis had been rising through the ranks, most recently dispatching Robert Whittaker. Now clearly marked as the next in line for a title shot, he would start his verbal campaign to secure his first championship matchup. Dricus would state that he wanted to become the first African champion, a statement based on the fact that whilst we had clearly had the three kings of Africa, Izzy, Kamaru, and Francis respectively, that Dricus' statements were not so much about nationality or race, but more so about where the belt was flying back home to. The 3 Africans who had claimed the belt previously had all done so by training in a completely different continent. Dricus' point was that he would, in his own words, become the first African-born man to claim a belt whilst breathing African air right up until fight week, taking it back home to South Africa and not America or New Zealand. Now, I do think that Dricus said this to get under the skin of Izzy, but I don't think he was trying to make it about race. So to cut a long and controversial and frankly rather boring story short, Izzy and Kamaru crashed out over all of this, Izzy even calling Dricus racial slurs himself and publicly goading Dricus into saying the N-word after his victory against Robert, and everyone got really upset about the whole race, country and skin color thing on the internet, which never really happens, am I right? Anyway, Ariel Helwani managed to be one of the main instigators of the whole thing, and in one of his interviews was inferring a lot of things to not only Dricus but his coach as well, things that just simply were not there. It was this interview that had Guru step in and defend the South African. This defense would prompt a good relationship to form between the CIT camp in South Africa and the MMA Guru himself. Unfortunately, Dricus' title shot would ultimately fall apart due to an injury on the South African's part, leaving the bad blood to simmer momentarily. Izzy would instead be matched up with Sean Strickland on relatively short notice. Guru, who had a rather bad taste in his mouth about Izzy, had been cooking up a certain video that he intended to break the internet with, and well, when he posted it, it took the MMA community by storm.
Something so weird to his own dog that feeding it mouth to mouth became absolutely nothing in comparison.
The video about Izzy and his dog would go truly viral, one of Guru's most viewed videos, not only on YouTube, but on all other social media platforms as well. In the funny way that the world works, the video would ultimately end up in the lap of Sean Strickland, who, now armed with some truly grating information on Izzy, would take every single opportunity he could to get under the champion's skin during their fight promotion. Izzy was meant to walk into what was framed as and expected to be his home turf, but was instead met with boos and goading.
I don't think I did, I think we did.
It seemed that every single fan was on Sean Strickland's side. I find that this might have been due to a combination of different reasons. Over the years, Izzy's character had started to morph into something that was completely unrelatable to for most fans. His dress sense, the way he talked, the way he acted, even his fighting style, had all started to turn fans off over the years. Personally, I don't really care what to do with their lives, and to be honest, I actually kind of really liked Izzy, but even I, a Izzy fan, was finding Strickland's fight week antics hilarious, and so the supposed pro-Izzy crowd was instead laughing at everything that Strickland said and cheering him on the whole way. And perhaps the most revealing thing about all of this was that when Strickland mentioned anything that was in Guru's video specifically, they all screamed their lungs out.
The moment I post the video of me, dog, they will put some credibility to that.
And the only way for them to have any kind of context as to what Strickland was talking about was that they had to have watched Guru's video as well. We were watching in real time Guru infiltrate the zeitgeist of the sport for the first time. Izzy's reaction to all of this? Well, he was pissed and thrown off to say the least, something that many speculate would have a direct impact on the fight. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Strickland's performance, but what I will say is that the most interesting thing about all of this is that directly after losing his belt, Izzy's first thought and the first thing that he said to Strickland was, "Don't talk about my family," pointing to a tattoo of his dog on his neck.
I was saying some stuff to you right after they wrapped the belt around you. Do you remember what he
I
told
was
you?
I think he was mad that I made from his dog. I'm not even joking.
So I don't really care what people say. This man was definitely distracted, and I think it was the Guru's fault. And so it became history. A man who made videos from his parents' shed for years had risen up through the ranks, grinding his ass off, and now was having direct effects on fight week, and perhaps fights themselves. That is a rise like no other. And if you go to Social Blade, you see for the first time in Guru's content career a massive spike in viewership. for better or for worse, pushing to the absolute extreme of negativity and drama in his content truly meant nothing but success for him.
This lie was born out of the mouth of an MMA YouTuber desperate for clicks. When you make a channel entirely dedicated to your opinion on others, you have to somewhat admit that your own talent isn't enough. You haven't got enough to entertain. You have to talk about other people in order to stay relevant.
I don't know if I play to him for having a YouTube channel, because I could not look at my own reflection if I look like that. I mean, he needs a shower and needs to bloody brush his teeth by the looks of him. I bet his breath stinks. And take the beanie off. Have a shower, you little scrotum. Anyway.
In some ways, the climax of Izzy and Strickland's drama had seen Guru put under a spotlight like never before, and this exposure, this massive growth, would prove to have some equal drawbacks.
You really think I got doxxed once? You really think that? And it stopped? You're so dumb. It's just, I already don't sleep. I thought I was making it clear with that. I already don't sleep, and this doesn't help when it's in the middle of the night, and it's not even like they're trying to get a reaction on stream. It's just some dumb shit, man. Police point pocket knives, yeah, they hit me with their torch, man.
It's something that is often less talked about. With a life on the internet, you become exposed to some of the strangest and most malicious people in the world. Immature sociopaths who want nothing more than to make your life traumatic at their own petty entertainment. And I honestly don't think that there are many people who think that this type of thing is okay. I doubt anybody would want to be tracked down and stalked by random people on the internet. And you see that in probably the most real and emotional moment from the Guru. He isn't even concerned about himself, but instead his family and the people in his life who have nothing to do with this and are yet still affected by it.
Parents and shit, man, it's so dumb. All my cousins and shit. And it affects neighbors and the way they look at me.
I don't think I speak alone here. Shame on whoever did that to him. But the reality is, if you put yourself on this or any other social media platform, then this is the fire that you dance with. There had long been rumours circulating of the Guru visiting his South African brothers.
But it's basically 100%. Unless something crazy happens. I'm going to South Africa.
And in November, that opportunity would reveal itself after it was announced that newly minted middleweight champion Sean Strickland would be defending his title against Dricus du Plessis in January of the new year. Guru had his opening. It was finally time for him to take his presence global. He hopped on a plane, and within moments of him landing, he would break the internet with a single photo. One photo proved to be enough to shut down years of people's abuse to how he looked. All those fighters that had claimed he was an incel, was ugly, fat and pathetic, was eviscerated in a single post. I like to imagine Luke Thomas, who 100% saw this photo, was shivering in his boots at the thought of eventually facing the MMA YouTuber Goliath in a creator clash matchup, his judgments shattered in an instant. As someone who had been on the periphery of the Guru for a while, and exchanged a couple of phone calls and a few emails back and forth, I was actually aware of his true form. But even I was impressed by his stature, standing next to somebody like the middleweight champion of the world. And it really was an incredible way for the Guru to cap off this year of validation. We also got to see him do a podcast with Cameron Simon and do a little bit of pad work as well, showing off those dormant taekwondo skills. 2023 was good for the Guru, but I don't think he quite realized that it was simply an appetizer for the main course that 2024 was about to be. If we go by the timeline, April 2024 was the biggest month for MMA Guru. The attention that he had been getting off the back of his success throughout 2023 was about to culminate in the most explosive tirade to date. At the center of Guru's next arc was the supposed GOAT of the sport, Jon Jones, a man that has done little to keep fans on his side throughout the entirety of his career. He is, for all intents and purposes, and in my opinion, a pretty bad guy. Guru had made no bones about this throughout his time on YouTube.
This guy, I hope he gets beaten up.
But a video posted on April 25th, 2025 entitled "The Deeply Closeted Gay UFC Champion" would prove to be not only his biggest dunk on the guy, but also his biggest score on this channel to date.
This is maybe the riskiest video I've ever had to make on my channel. Hear me out in this video, guys, okay? Jon Jones is a deeply... There's nothing wrong with it, YouTube admins! There's nothing wrong with it, YouTube admins!
Still, at the time of making this little documentary of mine, it is still his most viewed video, and one that would expose him to a whole new set of audience members, and a video that would be clipped, memed, and quoted to death on X. It would result in the biggest ever spike of followers, collecting a further 13,000 subscribers to his pile in that month alone. The extreme success of the video and the viral rhetoric that it spewed forth across social media certainly gave Guru every single bit of motivation he needed to keep creating content that satisfied his audience's appetite for this. If you can believe, he produced even more controversial and even more direct, no-nonsense calling out drama type media. Not even a couple days later, he went for the throat of Michael Chandler.
I have further context with a screenshot that I'm going to show on screen right now, which we'll get to in a second, which completely exposes Michael Chandler for the things that he's saying in this interview as a liar.
It didn't hit the same success as the Jones video, but it was certainly indicative of what things were going to be like going forward. There were also people there viewing who completely and utterly disagree with 1. What is being said, and 2. This type of content in general. And you see this play out in the comments, both sides going at each other ruthlessly. This mixed with Guru's discourse just creates a melting pot of engagement, as threads in the comments section get to be like consistently 60 to 100 replies long on almost every single comment thread. It's truly explosive engagement, and so whether you like it personally or not, the algorithm doesn't care. YouTube loves it regardless, and you can't really blame MMA Guru if he's going to make more of this content. It works for him, and if you didn't believe me, well, about a month later after this, a viral tweet would expose who the top earners in the MMA community are, and wouldn't you know it, look who was on top. Money talks, and Guru talked the loudest. Clearly, Guru's controversial takes lead to the biggest increase in viewership, but I think I would be remiss in not talking about why people stick around. It's one thing to make a clickable video about something drama-filled, it's another thing entirely having those people stick around for good and actually subscribe. I'd say that 90% of Guru's actual videos are very professional, very well researched, very informative, and extremely entertaining, neutral stuff.
This is every single fight to make next after UFC 319, Duplessis versus Chimaev. I've got all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now.
The fact is, for the most part, all Guru ever really displays is nothing but the heart of a true fan of this sport. He doesn't just shine a spotlight on the main card fighters, he will actively talk about and support all up-and-comers.
But I do think that if he does get taken down by Buchecha, he's cooked.
Even going as far as to financially support those on the regional scene.
But I am setting up a fund for regional fighters in the UK, and I'm going to start that this year at some point. Maybe, cool, I don't know. I've mentioned it on stream a few times.
I'm fully aware that my video at this point is simply talking about the main story beats of Guru's ascent, which happens to be the drama and controversial stuff, but I really want to point out that the man is generally a great, knowledgeable commentator on the sport and does deserve his flowers. When we look at MMA Guru's growth chart on YouTube, we see perhaps the biggest increase of followers by this point in October of 2024, a spot where his channel would really start to go parabolic, and it's all because of a now famous beef. So cast your minds back to the start of October 2024, Alex Pereira is defending his title for the 4th time against Khalil Roundtree, who had just come off of his knockout of Anthony Smith, and had recently just achieved level 175 with Choice Center, meaning he can now telepathically explode people's heads. Besides the main event, it's a rather mediocre card to be honest. It's now the middle of fight week, and as is custom, the press conference is well underway. The crowd sits through the rather predictable and bland questions, but at around 20 minutes into the whole gig, a woman steps up to the microphone to conduct some fine journalism, a rather bland, nothing out of the blue situation. Well, that is for everyone other than the MMA Guru, who decides to tweet out the following. Honestly so disrespectful of the UFC cameraman at the UFC 307 press conference to be like, nah, you guys got to see this, in the middle of her question. Honestly pathetic behavior and not funny. Hashtag UFC 307. I mean, we can all read between the lines of what the Guru is saying, and let's be honest, it's pretty rude. I can't say I've ever gone out of my way to tweet something like this, but fair enough, this is the Guru and he is doing what he does. Well, someone who we have yet to talk about in this MMA media retrospective video would come out of the woodwork and have some very choice words for the MMA Guru, essentially stating that he is the worst kind of human imaginable and everyone in the UFC hates him too. I'm of course talking about Nina Drama. Nina's path to being so integrated into the UFC is an interesting story to say the least. I did actually write a massive section, about 1,500 words, on who Nina is to be placed right here. I wanted to kind of show you guys that she isn't this massive industry plant that most people think that she is, but it kind of just derailed the video. So what I will say is that whilst Nina clearly is a part of the UFC media apparatus, her path to getting there was a grind. Just like the Gurus, not only had she managed to be successful in an absolutely ruthless industry in terms of modeling, but after she tried to transition away from this industry into social media, she also spent years grafting away to eventually be able to pitch her idea to the UFC, and even then she was met with resistance. And that is the same resistance and rejection that she had faced from multiple other fighting organizations as well.
A year of like begging them to let me interview the fighters, interview the boxers. I want to create this type of content. I know this will go viral. Like, let me interview them. They're like, we don't really think.
I don't watch her stuff. It's not the style of videos that I like, but I'm also not delusional enough to think that the UFC just brought a Playgirl model and started making her make content. Her path to this spot was as organic as someone like Megan O'Leary. Her interviews are genuinely quite funny sometimes and really do bring out the best parts of fighters' personalities. I think that most people's problem is that the opportunity that Nina gets with her exclusive access to fighters should also be extended to other content creators who might appeal to the less sexually frustrated majority. Back to UFC 308 and Guru's tweet. Well, wouldn't you know it? After years of avoiding his name like it was Voldemort, Nina truly unleashed all her pent-up feelings about the Guru. I think there was a lot of bitterness on her part because at the time, it really was her and Guru who were the most viral and who made the most waves. Her videos were getting millions of views and Guru's community was unstoppable. Guru's response video to this tweet was exactly what you would expect. 40 minutes of just pure, unbridled, uncensored, scathing remarks from the wheelchair-bound former Taekwondo master.
What's up, Playboys? Today we're going to be making a video about Nina Drama, who had a lot to say about me on Twitter. What's this guy doing on my screen? Hang on a second here.
And you know what? He did have some good points in his video. Nina did choose to die on a hill that wasn't exactly in keeping with her associations. This video, and all of the tweets that Nina and MMA Guru had sent out, were just exploding online. But Nina was about to hit the viral jackpot by what can only be described as an ASMR dominatrix smackdown of the Guru.
Baby, I didn't call you evil. I called you vile. And an excrement stain on society. That's what I called you. Because that's what you are.
The problem with this 3-minute and 33-second whisper sesh was that, whether you agreed with what Nina was saying about the Guru or not, was that it only put wind in his sails. Her video would end up getting 10 million views on Twitter, and if you take the time to scroll down through the comments, she is essentially getting ratioed to hell and back. For every person who felt validated in finally having someone call out the Guru for his divisiveness, she had inadvertently sent another 10 more followers in his direction. That was manifested in the 20,000 new subscribers that he gained from this whole situation, which at the time was the most he had ever achieved in a single month. It was also just another example of Nina throwing shade at those in this MMA media community. She was constantly claiming that she would make MMA media great again, but that sentiment just spat in the face of literally thousands of creators who have made some of the best pieces of content in the space. Some stuff that has had 7-fold the views that she would ever see. The constant looking down of her peers was grating to say the least. Nina could have just stayed on track, doing what she does best, and providing great and different entertainment, but that siren song of drama and controversy drew her in, something that she had got away with before. But this was the first taste of how ruthless the internet could be. Guru would leave the interaction where it was, feeling that he had secured victory in this beef.
I don't want to be the guy slandering a woman non-stop online with videos. I'll talk shit on stream. Once I've won, I don't want to then press the victory until they're bullied and crying.
And he moved on with more followers than he had ever secured in a 1 or 2 month period. the whole beef really did melt across the internet.
I don't know exactly what the beef is here between the two of them, but I would say there's room for everyone to build your own fan base, and God bless.
And if the whole Izzy and Jones thing hadn't seen Guru appear on your homepage, well, you certainly would have seen him now. He was everywhere. And I guess in retrospect, this kind of sums up the whole of 2024. It is no coincidence that as of right now, Guru's most viral videos are directly related to drama and controversy. It sells. He was shot right into the stratosphere off the heels of every drama that he covered, and was now crushing any memory of hitting that coveted 100k subscribers. He has now outgrown Ariel and Luke respectively in terms of consistent viewership numbers. Guru, whether anyone else on this platform wanted to accept it or not, was one of the biggest boys there, and that division between who likes what he does and who hates what he does was no longer just a crack, it was a gulf. I see it in my comments all the time. Anytime I place a clip of Guru in one of my videos, his mere presence is met with either hate or love, nothing in between. I particularly noticed since April 2024 and the Jones video that the opposing comments of Guru in my community have only gotten worse, and I'm not even putting Guru's opinions in my videos, it's just him screaming his head off in the montages. So you can imagine how divisive he really is in this community. But do you know what? I don't think he gives a shit whether you like him or not.
I like him.
Yeah, I like him too. He talks shit sometimes, but he's hilarious. He's like...
The road of this story started with the first brick to be laid. I'm sure Jerry Sherwood may lay a claim to that in some way, or perhaps MadSquabbles, or the creator of Jerry Park, the Coliseum of combat sports, those garish and offensive blogs, forgotten yet immortalized on the Wayback Machine, stand as digital monuments to an age of MMA media lost to antiquity. From there, it was Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, John Morgan, Karen Bryant, who endured the growing pains of paving this road into a new binary era. But I guess no one could have imagined how incredible the internet would eventually become, whilst they adapted to this ever-evolving, exponential beast as best they could. No amount of corporate gigs, money, or prior dominance could have kept up with or anticipated the tidal wave of social media content creators to come, all trying to fill a part of this niche in unique and creative ways. Since 2016, MMA YouTubers thrived, and this space has seen the creation of some of the greatest content that has ever graced the platform, from Secret Base's incredibly complex history of the UFC that tries to untangle politics, business, and fighting in a beautiful, unique format, to Patrick Gavier's and Lionel Rivera's breathtaking documentary-style pieces that truly put to the forefront the trials and tribulations of our favorite fighters, to the video essay heroes such as Mix Molly Whoppery, GK, and the undefeated and undisputed Valentina Shevchenko stan Napoleon Bonaparte. There are those talking head heroes, Lucas Glazy, the true savior of MMA YouTube. Then there are the boys, Bedtime MMA, TJ Loves Fights, The Fighting Business, Leo Cooper, Hoopero MMA, MMA Joey. Then there are the brains of this game, Jack Slack, perhaps the greatest actual writer in this space, and the Weasel, the only man actually smart enough to be able to count in this community. I mean, write it down in the comments below. Who have I missed? Who do you love? Who doesn't get enough respect? It is this platform that has saved so many. Guru went from questioning his existence as his life was squandered in a menial, meaningless job, to becoming one of, if not the most financially successful creators in the niche. For me personally, I sacrificed my creativity for money, joining the military because an avenue to pursue music or art was, well, financial reckoning. And then 7 years later, YouTube gave me a place to express myself and be validated in that pursuit, something that I'll always be eternally grateful for, a sentiment that I think many of my peers share. For me, it was Mix Molly Whoppery who showed me it could be done, and I think MMA Guru has now shown many people that they can have a future as creators too, that there is a path forward. In 2025, Guru started his show with perhaps the greatest athlete the sport has ever known, a show that has actively competed with those legacy shows we have previously discussed, and to say that they have crushed it would be a complete understatement. Guru's story, his rise, truly is a beacon of light in the dark for so many people, regardless of their pursuit. But he isn't the only spark in that abyss. People want to shit on Nina, but how many women do you think that she has inspired? No matter your voice, opinion, politics, humor, angle, creative choice, color or creed, there is a creator in this space growing this sport with you in mind. I wanted to make this video because, in my opinion, we are living in the greatest time of MMA content, all right at our fingertips, from literal 4-hour-long documentaries from geniuses like Napoleon Bonaparte to Nina's quirky interviews and whatever this guy is doing. There is greatness on display in all areas, and yet my feed gets filled with the latest hate piece of content, the newest feud, the most current drama expose, pointless infighting from a community that should have one focused goal: to grow this sport together and to help one another. The diversity that this space has cultivated should be celebrated. The creativity, the work ethic, the passion, it's some of the greatest on YouTube altogether. Ariel had it right.
I'll tell you my thoughts on Nina and this whole thing of like, you all suck and I'm gonna make MMA media great again. Which I just don't understand why you have to put people down who are also trying to do good stuff, good work.
And Guru's mother had it even more right.
But my mum actually told me to stop beefing with Nina. Good. So there you go.
We are a whole that champions the greatest sport the world has ever known. Ultimately though, MMA media is transitory, fleeting, and often fickle, as this video shows. You can rage against it, but that is folly. Each creator has their day in the sun. How they choose to spend that time defines them. The content creator life and death cycle is inevitable. It's been 8 months since Nina tried to tear down the Guru and proclaimed that she was the thing that was going to single-handedly change the course of how MMA media was consumed. And well, Nina's numbers on her long-form content have now started to noticeably decline. It's not a criticism of her. Stagnation comes for us all. Just another example of this preordained path that us as creators wander down. I am completely guilty of this, and it's not unique to me. It's Keon, it's Mexican martial arts, it's mixed mollywoppery. Most creators stare down the barrel of a 3 to 5 year life cycle. There is a myriad of reasons as to why we fall off. It's the algorithm, the money, the views, the dwindling notoriety, the burnout, the creativity drought. Different reasons, same ending. Guru has said that one day he'll walk off into the sunset, more than likely at his peak. At first we are novel, unique, sharing new ideas, but this lasts only a time. The fact is, MMA media isn't dying. In some sense, it never can. It's guaranteed to outlive any single creator or contributor to this space, no matter how big, no matter how small, no matter how meaningful, and no matter how important you think you are. The best we can hope for is to inspire the next generation. Ultimately, we are just digital flashes in a pan.